So I've been invited to speak on interfaith. That's what I'm going to do. Everyone that made an effort to be here obviously has interest or possible involvement in this line of work in some fashion or another. Truth be told, in fact, everyone is involved in interfaith. If you even shop, you're involved in interfaith. If you go to the store, surely, if you get on the subway, if you drive in, stop at a red light, everybody alive this day and age, especially in the United States of America, is involved in some fashion or another in interfaith. You encounter people who are in religious and in cultures entirely different from your own, and you've trained and educated yourself how to be a decent partner and social friend of people perfect strangers who you're meeting in your day-to-day work. So, fact is that everyone by nature is involved in interfaith in some fashion or another. All of you here who would make a big effort to be up early in the morning on a Saturday morning are definitely involved or interested in interfaith work. I don't know a lot of you, so perhaps I'm speaking to people that are very heavily engaged and invested in this type of work. Despite the fact that this is probably an uncommonly committed group of interfaith activists, I would bet, and I might be wrong, but very few, if anybody here, does nothing but that's the only thing you do, is interfaith work. If you do it at all, you do it in addition to other things. You might have a livelihood. Even if you're a church preacher or a church pastor, part of your work is involved in the particular religion of your own, and you're educating and raising up your congregation and your parishioners in the unique path of faith of your own community. So even people who are full-time in religion itself are not necessary. It's very difficult. There's very few life paths in which you don't do anything else but that. So what I would like to posit for you to ponder is from everything you do, interfaith might be the best or way up there among the things you do. So everyone is involved in it to some extent or another. This particular group and individuals in it are likely involved in it to a higher degree than most. And likely very few people here, if any, do nothing but that. So you do many other things in your life. In addition to that, you do interfaith work to a greater or lesser extent. So it's one of many things you do. What I would like to posit is that it is among the best or the best thing you do. For example, one of the things you do is own a car, right? Most people or everybody here owns a car. That's something you do, right? You got to insure it. You got to make sure the tire, what is it? Air pressure is right, and you got to. It's work. Owning a car is work. It provides convenience, but it's one of the things you do. Correct?
Yeah, correct.
All right. Do you do poorly at it? Do you do badly at your car? I think you don't. I think you're pretty serious about it. Let somebody touch you from behind while you're sitting at a red light. You'll see how you feel about your car, right? You're pretty serious about doing that well. You don't let your insurance lapse, and so on and so forth. You don't put bad gas in it unless it's old and you don't care about it. But you do it well. You think about it. You're careful about it. It's not something you just take for granted. You invest in that. Do you have a garden? Does anybody here, are they gardeners? You have a garden. If you do poorly at that, it's like throw the seeds out and good luck, Don't water it, don't care about it, don't trim it. Come around, like show up in October and nothing there. Sorry. It's enjoyable. I like to be with the earth. Now you want to see something for what you did. You want to see something for what you did. Golf. How about golfers? Any golfers? They're crazy. They're crazy. There's like one bad shot and their whole week is ruined. You know what I'm saying? They don't want to be bad at it. They're not careless at it. It's one of the things they do. It's not everything they do. They have a job. They take care of their kids. They help their son with his algebra. But they also golf. It's just one of the things they do. One bad shot and they're shot for the whole week. Clubs go in the pond. So, of all the things you do, are there any of them? And I mentioned casual and relatively inconsequential. No, algebra with your kid is not inconsequential. But you could go a week without golf. But even something like that, and you're dead serious about, and you know whether you're getting better or worse, don't you? Right? You know whether you're getting better or worse at these types of things, at gardening and things like that. There's measures of whether you've done your gardening well this year, right? It has to do with what you see, the flowers or the fruits or the vegetables, correct? So in interfaith, I'm suggesting that it's one of the very best things you do, and I would venture to guess that you don't take it. Forgive me for being, accusatory. That's not a nice thing to do to a bunch of people. But I mean, are you checking? Are you getting better at it? Is there a measure? Are there tomatoes at the end of the season? And so, if it's something that everyone does, it's something that this group in particular does. What are we doing to assess? Am I getting better at it? What kind of bad shot ruins my whole week for me as an interfaith individual? What is that? Usually nothing at all. We don't have anything that occurs that makes me think that my interfaith commitments and involvement has really suffered. This was a bad day. I never want to do it again. We don't even know what the measure of such a thing is. Why would I call it the best of what we do? The reason why I call it the best of what we do is because it has to do with the spiritual side of things and the religious side of things. And the spiritual side of things and the religious side of things in our life includes things like how do I carry out my responsibility as a parent? Am I a good parent? Am I a bad parent? How do I learn how to do that? Who's teaching me that? There are some secular investigation into parenting, but usually it's from religious life and spiritual life that we are getting the guidelines of what we need to build up the type of character that does parenting well, right? The gentleman has a new young girl. Bento's kidding around about not getting any sleep, and I'm sure there's lots of nights he's not getting any sleep. You can do that particular thing badly, or you can do it well. Correct? About how you deal with having to get up and take care of a crying baby in the middle of the night. Those things that build up the type of character that respond well to those situations come out of spiritual life and come out of religious life. Or you come back to bed and you're nasty and you're mean to your wife, and why don't you do it? Why am I up every... you can do it badly. And the things that are governing or guiding or correcting or helping those things about how you are as a parent only come from spiritual life and religious life. How you are as a husband or how you are as a wife. Yes, indeed, there are secular things, communication skills, and yes, okay. These are great things. They're helpful. But the real transformative guidance for the most important, how am I as a son? Where do I learn what it means to be a decent son? Or a decent husband, a decent brother, a decent sister. Those things that guide those qualities of the core of my life, they're all based in spiritual places. That's how we emerge and improve ourselves and involve ourselves. Then there's other things. There's other unique virtues that only come out of religious and spiritual training. Patience. Whose job is it? What part of society? Mechanics, surgery, mathematics. Where does the training and encouragement to be a patient human individual? What part of life does that come from? That's so necessary. You get stuck in traffic, and you are either at peace, you're constructive in some way, or you're just tearing yourself up. You're making yourself sick. Sitting in your own car by yourself, making yourself... What part of life takes care of trying to help me do that well? Get stuck in traffic well. I'm great at being in traffic. Some people should really properly say that. I'm good at it. Where did they get that, how to be good at it? It should come from spiritual training, religious training. Humility, compassion, I spoke about those last night. These are all qualities that are entirely come from that sector of life. And then there's parts of life that are absolutely important to us and utterly out of our control. These have to do with birth, marriage, and death. They're not utterly out of our control, but we are so dependent on the infinite divine. We are so dependent on the grace and blessedness of God's merciful care for our welfare that when it comes to the birth of a child, we become prayerful. We become religious. Everybody becomes religious. There's a dimension of it that is out of our control and utterly in the hands of an infinite center of compassion. Yeah. Marriage. We can do everything we can. We can go to an astrologer. We can take our parents' counsel. We do everything we can to get it right. Same with birth. We try to eat right as pregnant mothers, and we try to keep our hearts and emotions and attitudes correct as present mothers. The father should similarly be deeply invested in the course of the... Yes, we do try to do everything right up until the moment of birth. But the birth itself, we are helpless. We're helpless. It's all in the hands of God at a certain way, at a certain moment. Marriage, same thing. Same thing. Your child gets married. Oh my God, a child... even though my children is married, I still don't know what my parents went through. They are so worried. Is this the right girl? Is this the right guy? Will you be happy? Will it go well? Will it end in divorce in a year, in 5 years, in 7 years? Will the person be healthy? And so on and so forth. This is another occasion in life that's utterly spiritual and religious in nature. And finally, passing on to the other side. Do we do that well? Are we at peace? Have we made peace? Have we collected our lives as a gentle and rich tapestry that's offered to God and heaven and to the earth that we leave behind and the people we've tried to love, we've tried to influence, right? This is also in God's hands. We gather and we hope that the fullness of a life lived is to the eternal credit of the person who had strove every day, had the alarm clock ringing in their ear every day, struggled to work, cried for their losses, helped people in need, etc. That's a whole life lived, and then there's a time of transition into the eternal life. That too is entirely spiritual, entirely religious. We're in a certain way helpless, although we do everything we can to do our fair share and care and do right. So those things I've mentioned in haste, a casual collection of stuff that happens in religion. So why, therefore, then, is interfaith the most important of all the things you do, of the many things you do? Because a Muslim person has to take care of this parenting, being a brother, being a sister, being a husband, being a wife, going to the other side, having newborn babies, blessing their children in marriages. They do it all in Islam. They do it all with the Quran. All these things that are absolutely important to us. We're going to meet a Muslim, and all their needs and hopes and dreams and everything that is going to be central to their lives all comes from their mullahs, from their imams, from their scriptures. You're going to meet a Catholic. You're going to meet a Christian. A Presbyterian. You're going to meet a Hindu. Why can't we look into their eyes and know that when they married their two children together, they were utterly dependent on and relying on Hinduism, all that Hinduism has to offer. Its scriptures, its teachers, its traditions, its family guidance, its cultures. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is the main thing we want to meet when we meet someone and look into each other's eyes. This is the main thing we want to know. What is it that's taking care of you, of all that you want to be? One day we're all going to pass on to the other side. What is the world around you that's taken care of? Oh, you're a Muslim. Oh, I'm trying to learn what it teaches you about that. It's the main way we're together. It's not an activity. It's not a thing you do. It's the main way we're together, is bumping up against the kind of soft cushion of our spiritual home. A Christian home, a Muslim home, not home like your house. Do you know what I mean? It's the bubble in which we conduct our lives and try not to be bad. Try not to tear ourselves up in traffic. Try not to, and so on. Do you see? That we're like bubbles of our faith inheritances, communities, cultures, teachings, scriptures, teachers, and so on. That's why I say it's the best thing, and therefore, in the beginning of when I started speaking, and I mentioned that a lot of us, I think I recognize that song. Josh, what was that? No problem at all. No problem at all. At least you have a decent song on your ring. If it was some bubblegum music, then I would have called attention to it. But anyway, so anyway, in the beginning of the speech, I was describing things that are less important in our lives, that we're deadly serious about ranking and measuring, and that we're doing better or doing worse. And then the second thing I just did was point out how spiritual life, in some fashion or another, whether you're a member of a formal community or whether you read a lot in New Age, or it doesn't matter what it is, but spiritual life is the thing that we drink at our core needs and our core longing to be good and do good and be helpful, be compassionate. And so why would we be so careless about the very best thing in our life? Why would we have no measures about if we're getting better or worse at it? Why would we not know that if we did it once, we've made some progress there? Why would we come back and do the exact same thing again? Week after week after week after week after week after week, after meeting after meeting, after $1 million conference after $1 million conference. Why would we come back and do the same thing again and again and again and again? It's like, do you have any hobbies? Yeah, I'm a golfer. How do you do? I always shoot a 98. I always slice on the third tee. You know, I always put it in the water 2 or 3 times. Now I'm down to, I only have 2 golf balls left. I won't be able to golf after that. But nobody's like that. They'll tell you, you know, I finally, you know, I got a new 9-iron, you know, it's really improved my game. Or, do you see what I'm saying? So if we hit the most important part of our lives, then we need to begin to we need to begin to, as a community, start to add some measures, add some sense of responsibility, add some understanding that we want to do this well and in an interesting way, and find people who are good at it. Find people who are good and work with them and learn from them. If we know somebody who's good at fishing or something like that, we want to read articles they wrote and things like that. Do you understand? So I recently wrote and published an article, and I talked about how am I doing, Bento? By the way, I didn't look at my clock. Oh, okay, that's a lot of time. I'll leave time for an encore for the band. Okay, so in the encouragement that, and this isn't an accusation that we've been slacking on the job. It's just how interfaith. It's just where it's at so far, but it shouldn't be. If more people understood that it's something that we want to take seriously, improve at, get better at, this type of thing will bleed upward into the real serious matters, like terrorist activities. How do young people get radicalized and things like that? Those type of things which are the serious, hard, rough edges of interfaith at the high levels in which life is lost and things like that. That's the fruits of that interfaith doesn't happen well. We throw up our hands. We're lost. How do we address that? It's because, generally speaking, although everyone is full of goodwill and full of good interfaith impulses, a genuine appreciation and love and embrace for one another, the evidence that the field has not emerged well is seen in these very hard and difficult areas, like the radicalization of youth and the persistence of violence against innocents perpetrated in the name of religions, or perpetrated by one religion against another, and things like that. Those are the evidences that the field itself is not yet serious enough about itself. If we're not serious enough about it, we won't experience too many problems in our lives. We still like the lady in the hijab that checks us out at Kroger's. We're friendly. I know about her children. There aren't too many consequences about it. But that the field doesn't get better shows itself in the bad moments, in the terrorist attacks, in the shootings in churches, and so forth. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's why we need to get better. So it's not to say you've been doing it bad or we've been doing bad. It's to say let's all recognize the need to all be responsible for all the elements of wherever religions and their discord is causing serious difficulties in the world. It could be with immigration policy. It could be with unspoken racial inequality opportunities in government spaces or in schools. We don't know all the places where not being serious manifests itself. Okay, you with me? Good. Okay. So what I want to recommend for starting as a community to be progressive in interfaith, the exact same way that we're progressive in everything we do, in trying to help my kid with their algebra, in gardening, in whatever we do. We like measures, we like progress, improvement, and we don't like doing the same thing without evidence of improvement again and again and again. First of all, anytime you undertake something explicitly interfaith, start with definitions. Start with a clear definition. What am I doing? Am I doing a two-faith thing? Is it a Christian-Jewish dialogue? Is it a three-faith thing? Is it a religions of Abraham? Is it Christian-Jewish Muslim? Get the particular project that you're involved in, get it defined. Put definitions in there. so that then it can begin to be subject to an assessment of its progress. Is it from many religions? Is it social? Is it cultural? Is it scriptural? Is it issues of power? What's called ecclesiological, how your churches are structured. Put as many definitions into the particular work you're going to do, and that will help give us a starting point against which we can begin to assess our efforts. Secondly, after you've defined, or we've defined the particular thing we want to do on this occasion. For example, I want to bring a Catholic priest and a Muslim imam to grade schools to have a half-hour storytelling session with the children in first grade. Okay, it's two religions, and it's aimed at young people. And the next thing you want to do, so that's interfaith, isn't it? Interfaith, but it's not vaguely interfaith. It's a project. It's two people going to grade schools. So definitions, define the work. Next, have a clear purpose. Why are you going to grade schools? Why are you not going to middle schools? Why is it storytelling? And so what do you want to happen? What are you hoping will happen by telling these children these stories? Why have you picked this as your project? Have a clear purpose. Have a clear purpose. So that even maybe one of the purposes is, even if these children experience hatred and bigotry at home, they have directly experienced something contrary in front of their eyes with a nice man who was supposed to be the big evil group, and he was the nicest guy. He came to our school and he read us a story, and it was an interesting story, and so forth. You see, you have a clear purpose. Okay? Then the other thing is to set parameters of the project. Parameters involve many type of decision about how wide or how broad or how deep or so forth. Define your project in its range and in its extent. Is it just for one school? That's good enough. Is it only about stories? Is it about scriptures? Is it about leadership? And so forth. Set the parameters around the project. And finally, you know the context in which the project is happening. Is it happening in a friendly place socially? Are the schools welcoming you? Is it happening in a difficult place? Is it happening in a rich place? Is it happening in a poor place? Is it happening in a place where there are a lot of religions exist already? Is it happening in a religiously, what is it, monoform, or what's the word I'm looking for? Like just there's only one religion in the whole area. What is it? Homogeneous. No, homogeneous maybe. Whatever, we'll flip a coin. I'll take an adjective. Thank you for everybody that's tried to help me on that. Okay, do you see what I mean? So this is parameters. And so I think with these four things, we will be able to start to be more normal in this extremely important part of our lives and of our contribution to society. It won't be abnormal. We won't have much tolerance for doing the same thing again and again and again. That's abnormal. And interfaith, as I tried to argue, is the most important thing in our lives. Not because that's the main thing we want to, main way we're in touch with somebody. So let me give I'm going to tell a story and then I'll close. I'll tell an example and then I'll close. In 1990, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait due to miscue from the U.S. State Department and was sitting in Kuwait causing a lot of trouble internationally. It led to the first Gulf War with Schwarzenegger and Powell and stuff like that. Anyway, my group, the Interreligious Federation for World Peace, was very well situated among Muslim leaders, and we gathered the 10 top Muslim. When the U.S. decided to threaten Hussein with military force to drive him out of Kuwait, a military tactic that Hussein appropriated for himself was to define his posture against the West, against America, as jihad. Are people familiar with what jihad is? Jihad is religiously justified resistance, even to the extent of physical battle. Religiously justified resistance, even to the extent of physical battle. Okay? That's external jihad. Internal jihad is something else. So he defined his stance against America as jihad, meaning that all Muslim believers would have to stand with him against the West, against the U.S. If all Muslim believers stood with him against the U.S., then we would have had a global religious war with 1 billion people on one side, 1 billion people on the other. My group, the Interreligious Federation for World Peace, gathered the 10 top Muslim lawmakers in Alexandria in a secret meeting for 2 days to determine whether or not Hussein was correct in defining his posture as religious. We studied for 2 days. We went through the Quran. They fought and argued. I have hundreds of stories about that meeting, But by God's grace, by the elegance of these Muslim muftis, deliberating with all their heart in front of the infinite God, Allah, decided that it was not. And they issued a fatwa. This is not jihad. They weren't on one side or the other. They weren't pro-America. They were just assessing the pure religious assessment of whether or not Hussein's claim was legit or not, religiously. 9 of them issued, all 10 issued a fatwa denying Hussein the claim that his posture against America was jihad. And so it liberated or released the entire Muslim war from having to stand in a battle against the West. And really something nobody wants to do is try to fight the American armed forces. It's really a bad idea. I don't recommend it for any of us. 1 minute to go. So I was amazed. The second that the fatwa was agreed upon by these muftis, almost before we left the room, it freaked me out. Almost before we left the room, through Arab intelligence lines, it was everywhere in the world. It was in Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Tunisia, you name it, Indonesia, somehow or another, this was instantly passed through to the Muslim world. And that's why Saddam stood alone. We could have stopped the war had Senior 41 not given a deadline. He gave a deadline and we were stuck with the war. I was mad about that because we could have stopped the war. Because Hussein was isolated, then it would have just been a little bit of diplomatic time necessary to work it out so he could get out with saving face. But we actually were postured to stop the war. I'm going to go a minute over, or two, tops. Just as this was done, we're done. We actually stopped a war. We stopped a world war. Suddenly, one guy, out of the blue, quiet all weekend long, sitting in the middle of Alexandria, out in this isolated place. Wait a minute, who is this Kaufmann? What do we know about him? He's an agent of Israel. What is he even doing with us? Everything was like this fragile, kind of just balancing a hair on the tip of your nose we were fine, we were done. And suddenly this guy's calling me an agent, of an Israeli agent. And everything was about to be lost. And I mean, a lot was at stake. It's not me anyway, but out of whatever reason, I thought on my feet, or God intervened, or, call it however you want to brag about yourself, I don't know. But anyway, I looked around the room, and I found one of the Muslims with a callus on his forehead. Have you ever seen Muslims with callus on their forehead? Because they touch their forehead to the ground when they pray. They pray 5 times a day, and part of the rituals include touching your forehead to the ground. Have anyone ever attended Muslim prayers? Yeah, and so you know what I'm talking about. Callus, dark spot. So while this guy's yelling at me, I say, Abdel, from the look of your forehead, my guess is that Allah is familiar with your voice. Could you please pray and help us decide about this man's concerns? And he prayed, and he reports, no, we've done correct. Kaufmann is here to help, blah, 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 blah. And it recovered. It was just kind of like an evil spirit invaded this guy, tried to shred it up. And then I called for prayer, and we recovered our fatwa. The reason why I tell this story is because it's just to reiterate at my conclusion that interfaith is religious. It's religious. It can't be done by people who don't care about religion. What rescued that particular moment was not that I was an expert on oil, not that I was an expert on the political structures of Islam, not that I was even an expert on Islam. It was because I'm religious. The work is religious. That is the heartbeat of interfaith. And so it's also a work and a responsibility for our own selves as we want to start to do this type of work well and for the sake of good. Thank you very much for your time and attention.